Well, hello and welcome to commsHERO. This is a conversation hosted by myself, Tom Gaymor. It's about policing, communications and social media in today's day and age. We've got a wonderful panel of guests as well. We've got Harry Tangye, who, it's fair to say, pioneered social media down in his Devon and Cornwall area that he was based at. He's now retired. We've got Knowles, who is a big advocate of police officers and their work nationally, but also has a real interest in the media world through his work. We've got Adderley, who is a serving chief constable from Northants Police, and the marketing expert, Sophia Can. So thank you everyone for joining me. We're going to have a fabulous chat, I'm sure, over the next 60 minutes. And I think this is a topic that is really important. Police legitimacy is being challenged and has been challenged over the last couple of years, it's fair to say. And that extends to the online world as well. It's a hard fix in terms of the online community. And I'd like to open up my questioning to Nick, being a serving chief constable. What do you see, and this is a broad question, what do you see as the police's role in terms of the digital world? What is policing's role, and how can it communicate with its communities and the people that police officers serve?
We can't hear you, Nick.
Yeah, I'm just checking in. Are you on mute, Nick?
No, he's not on mute.
No. So we just wait to hear from Nick. I will pass that, whilst we fix Nick's connection, I will pass that question on to Harry, because you were involved in spearheading Devon and Cornwall's engagement, if you like, digitally. How did you see your role, and what was the reasons for you getting involved in social media as a police officer?
Yeah, hi Tom, thank you. Basically, it all started with me really when I was part of the traffic department armed response, and so I was doing a bit of road safety stuff, and a video went a little bit viral, if you like, and I got a little bit of interest, and it was really good. And my force, probably regret it to this very day, suggested that they might start an account, a social media account. And they said you can either change your own one or you can start a new one and have your own private, but they were a little bit nervous about talking about too much policing on private accounts, which sort of I understood. Well, I didn't want to waste those 60 followers I had on my own account, so I changed mine to the force account. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here now. So it was because of that leadership. Sean Sawyer was, and Paul Paul Netherton and Sean Sawyer were the command team, the chief constable and det. Phenomenal support, because they realised that you're not going to please all the people all the time. And where I think other people have sort of panicked a little bit and shut people down, I was sort of given a little bit of top cover, but I had to play by the rules. What it does for me is like an additional form of neighbourhood policing. If you're going down the street and you see a window open and there's an elderly lady's just walking out of the house, you might say, oh, do you want to put that window shut, sort of thing? You're giving a little bit of advice or whatever. You're also actually finding criminals, because you get people up there that badly required, needed and wanted by forces for serious offences. So the word goes out there. You can also have a little bit of humour, as long as it's sort of, it's respectable, like you would a police officer in uniform over the garden fence with somebody having a chat, having a bit of a chuckle. It does that neighbourhood policing, but then I can sort of contact thousands of people in a day, as opposed to 1, 2, and 3. But you'll never beat the boots on the ground neighbourhood policing, though.
And Nick, from your perspective as a member of the public, but somebody with a huge amount of media experience, what do you see policing's role in the digital world to be? And should policing have a integral part should social media form an integral part of their communications?
Yeah, it absolutely should. I mean, interestingly, I got involved I actually met Harry when he got a bit of flack from the newspapers after posting a social media post. He'd been dealing with a massive traffic backup, and once he'd finished and got the road moving, he took a quick snap of himself with the traffic going by underneath, saying, "For those of you in the queue waiting, just to let you know, we've got the front moving again, so it won't be long before you get underway." One of the newspapers, Nationals, picked it up and said, "Police say they're busy, but the cop still has time to take selfie." So I got stuck into the press, the relevant press, and said, try to keep the sort of playground insults out of this. Actually, he was doing a valuable service to people stuck in the queue and actually engaging with people and letting them know what was going on ahead, and actually saying pretty much get yourself prepared, because as you know, people will switch off their engines, they'll stop up a picnic. And so I was able to sort of, I don't know, really just put a positive view to something that Harry was getting some flack for at that stage. That's true, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, what you did was start the reasons why other people should then join in and support me, because there was quite an influential person who's trusted and loved on our screens, Nick, and but who is respected. And very quickly after that, the head of my professional standards, who's still is a wonderful man, he then backed me up and said, "Carry on with what you're doing." That then led to other senior officers in other forces to say, "Yeah, I support this. This is really good." So sort of Nick helped to turn the tide on that and just allow other people to, yeah, he's right. I'm going to say something now because I feel as though I'm not going to be ambushed by everyone. So yeah, it was, I don't think it would happen now, would it, Nick? Do you think that newspaper headline?
I don't know. I think it wouldn't be quite so childish a headline. I mean, it still happens occasionally where you get silly responses to the police, taking a photograph of them buying sandwiches in a shop because there are no canteens anymore. So, cops have to go out and buy their food, and you still get the occasional thing where, should be out doing the job. Instead, he's shopping in, that you'll always get that kind of silliness. But it's a chance for people who actually support the police and understand what they actually do on a day-to-day basis to speak up for them. I think it's critical for the police to actually have a voice on social media. And I'm slightly concerned about the idea that you trust your officers to go out and interact with the public on a one-to-one basis and in the community, but you don't trust them to interact on social media. Now, I'm not unaware that some people do stupid things on social media, and we've seen cases where police have done really stupid things, at which point then you absolutely should pull them up on it. But what you shouldn't be doing is making rules for everybody on the actions of an idiot, because then you're treating everybody in your organization as being incapable. And what happens is, in organizations, if you start to make rules to try and stop any situation that might occur, you end up with a very turgid and slow moving and uncommunicative business, whether it be policing or whatever. I have a friend who's a corporate philosopher. I know that sounds like somebody you give money to for no reason, and they come in and do a great talk and then go back to £10,000.
That's the job I want.
Yeah, but he's really interesting actually, because what he does now these days is goes into companies and gets them to take rules out of their system. Start to trust the people that you employ, because otherwise you slow everything down. Every time there's an incident, let's write another clause in the contract for that. If somebody does something that's stupid on social media, then we won't do social media. If somebody does something bad where we turn up, I mean, you wouldn't say an officer acted stupidly sorting out a road accident, so let's not do road accidents anymore. But somehow with social media, they said, because there have been examples of people doing stupid things, we can no longer trust all of our 120, 130,000 officers across the country. And I think it's a really big mistake, because the world is moving into the social media area. What you should be doing is training up your people in social media, not stopping them from doing it altogether.
I think you make some really good points, and it centres around legitimacy as well. I think with social media that there is an element of accountability, and you raised another good point around policing owning its own content. It's so important for policing to be positive and on the front foot when it comes to social media, in my opinion, and not just be defensive. So it's not about challenging legitimacy or challenging negative narratives. It's about actually realizing that policing owns its own content. So we see now more and more in other industries. So let's take Formula One, for example, my industry. Ferrari, if they're going to announce something, don't need the world media to announce anything. They now have their own news channels, their own engagement, and their own platform through digital platforms to be able to own its own content and its own information. And I think policing needs to explore that more and not necessarily be as reliant on external platforms, but view that as a collaboration and view those as informal partners, but actually be constantly striving to move forward with their own brand strategy, messaging, and positive and authentic content. But I sense a trepidation to do that because of the legitimacy and the challenge that policing sometimes faces, where you find you're running around trying to please others and other opinions. I think you touched on that, Nick, there, and that can be quite divisive and quite challenging, because I don't think you'll fix that.
I agree, and I think one of the interesting things is actually seeing forces saying, "Okay, close down all your private or your personal account, and we'll take it under corporate umbrella." Now, I think that's a really bad idea. What you're essentially doing then is giving tech experts and social media experts the lead in police social interaction. And you can see it in some of the things that they announce that really aren't positive. Like, I saw a story, I'm going to get into trouble for this, but I saw a story the other day where the Met actually were thanking teenagers for mentoring their senior officers. Which in social media speak sounds like a really good idea because it comes across really well, but it also comes across as literally, I mean, I'm not sure how hardened criminals and gangs in London are supposed to be, supposed to be wary of senior police officers in the Met if they're being mentored by teenagers. And to a bunch of corporate tech people and social media, it sounded like a good idea, but they're not police officers. They're not people who deal with the difficulties that police officers do. And I think you end up with the sort of a sterile and corporate voice rather than an actual voice. And those people may well keep things on trend better, but it's less real, it's less authentic than actual officers.
What's interesting with those points, Nick, is you make a good point around, from a corporate perspective, you're looking at brand strategy, brand messaging, brand awareness, data, engagement ratios, placement and strategy, all around timing and that kind of stuff. And Sophia will really pick up on some of those pillars there with all her experience. But there is actually an operational need for policing. We've touched on that already, with the digital world providing the new neighborhood policing. Harry talked about that. It's the eyes and ears. And that's not only getting into local communities and talking to local communities, but that's also the prevent strand of policing. So you can look at violence and county lines, if you like, because certain individuals will put their actions up on social media posts pre and post incidents. And you've also got the help strands around engagement for MISPers and local communities coming in. So there's a real need for sort of an operational footprint and an authentic police officer footprint for the digital language. But also I understand that there is a corporate sense around some of the pillars that I spoke about at the beginning of that sentence. Sophia, let's bring you in on your understanding, and you're actually working with West Yorkshire at the moment on some of those points.
I am, yes. So I'm really torn because, Nick, some of the points that you've made, I totally agree with. I am an ambassador of policing and pro-policing. It's how I've met Harry. And I think police officers should be on social media, but with some good training as well, because like you said, I have seen some bad examples. I'm sure Harry won't mind that we sometimes use your examples, don't we? In the
Everyone
training
uses
and
my examples.
On the good or the bad side?
Or the
mainly
bad.
But how to do it better, we're really constructive. We don't just go in and rip him apart. We do look at some of the stuff and look at how we can rephrase things, because we're in that sort of society where people will find things offensive. We can't please everyone, but you know, working in comms, it's our job to anticipate the next step. And when you're out there, you're doing the same as police officers. But do the public want to hear about every burglary you've gone to and things like that? I suppose it's getting the tone right, because you are probably the most criticised industry. So you do have to be careful. You know, Harry, you know yourself how you felt when you have put a tweet out and got a backlash. It's horrible.
And I totally understand, Sophia, why officers don't want to gamble that, because they think, okay, what's in it for me? Because the complaint system at the moment is that somebody has to take the call and they have to get back to the person, and then they have to write it on a bit of paper and they have to look at it, and it goes to the supervisor and it speaks to the officer concerned. The officer feels bad because he was going to have a good day, but now it's a rubbish day. Just to give you an idea, out of 30 years, I must have had probably about 3 or 4 complaints. In the last 5 years, I probably had 8. And it is a lot of stress, there's a lot of pressure, and officers just don't need that. So I can sort of see why they're ducking out. So I think it has to be from both sides, really, that there have to be, and I remember somebody from comms who I didn't get on too well with, came with a big folder with a right, sit down. We've got a few, and he'd left the best to last, which was me in a motorway saying, come on, guys, just slow the hell down. This is 5 aquaplanes that I've dealt with tonight. And the 2 complaints were that shouldn't be tweeting on the motorway. And I said, you should, look, that's my playground, so leave it with me. There was plenty of safe stuff that I won't bore you with, that I knew I was perfectly safe. But I said, you need to listen to the 29,998, the neutral and the positive ones, and the message that sent out, and stop just prioritizing the complaints and not listening to anyone else, because that's the problem at the moment as well.
It's interesting, actually, because you talk about, having to deal with a backlash. The backlash isn't not necessarily that just because there's a backlash doesn't necessarily mean they're right. 100 years ago, every village had an idiot. Now online, they can all get together and be a community, and it can look like that we should be listening to them. That still doesn't stop them being idiots. There is a reaction sometimes to, we have to do. And we're in a cancel culture too, where, I love oranges. Well, your silence on pears is very telling. You
make some good points there, because you can only ever be responsible for what you say, not what other people hear. So what you say and what other people hear are 2 different things. And my granddad always said when I was growing up, and I'm 40 now, so it was a long time ago, we used to watch rugby at Twickenham, and he used to say, look, there's 80,000 professionals watching 30 amateurs here. And I never really understood what he meant. But the perception plays out now in social media, where you just are cancelled out if you are a chosen professional in your field. So I work in TV. I'm a lead commentator for Formula One or Sky Sports F1's IndyCar, for example. The amount of abuse that I get when I go on TV is utterly staggering. And it will be the same for Nick, or, when Gary Lineker hosts Match of the Day. If you look at the tweets, it's what do you know, what you did, and it's the constant undermining of expertise and experience that's a real challenge. And when we go back to police legitimacy, I think that is something that the police need to look at, because you will always get people that are negative towards. So I go on a lot of ride-alongs and I will post certain things, and there are always negative comments around whatever that call might be. And it's really interesting. They're water off a duck's back to me, but when you see the police officers' faces, when you show them the comments, the fear and the panic around just negativity is utterly staggering, and I think that side of things is a real challenge for policing, and I think it's a real turn-off for a lot of police officers, like Harry says, to actually go and actively put their heads above the parapet and have a an account that isn't an anon account.
Can I just say as well, it's really interesting watching how people deal with it. That you can, you'll get a response where somebody said something, a police officer said something on social media, and the social media team will say, we've had a real backlash on this comment. Nick Adderley, the reason I'm disappointed Nick Adderley isn't actually in with us at the moment and able to chat to us is because when I see his tweets, he obviously looks at what's been said and then says, do you know what, I've looked at this and I back the officer 100%. And there's not enough of that going on at the moment. Not enough chief constables are saying, no, I actually back my officers here. The police have become a massive political football in a way they haven't been for, just it's terrible at the moment. They're, political football, easy clickbait for television and print papers, and online. The haters are always going to hate. You've got a community of criminals out there that the police are dealing with who are always going to be negative about the police, and they're online and you don't know who they are, so you don't know what their motivation is. Actually having someone like Nick Adderley actually standing up for police and going, no, I've looked at it and that's is the kind of backup that you need in order for police to continue to be able to do the good work they're doing on social media. And I don't think that giving it to a corporate team to oversee it is always necessarily a good idea, because they will see a negative reaction or a backlash as being something you need to worry about. It isn't always.
It's getting the right people in your comms team. Sorry, just to put in there. I am seeing, the different types of personalities in police comms in particular, or in comms generally. There does seem to be this fear factor of, just don't, like somebody said to me, we're quite bland and beige with our social media. And it was like, why? And it was a police team. And they said, we just don't get into trouble. And I think, like you said, Nick, if we had other chiefs like Nick Adderley, you probably would do a bit more what Harry was doing, because you've got that support. But to think that you're going to be dragged into a comms team and shouted at or whatever, which isn't the way to deal with it.
I agree with you though, in the aspect of, some training would be good, even if it's just attracting. And I say to people, take photographs, get colours. It doesn't have to be a photograph of the whole scene. You need to be sensitive where you take that photo, but to highlight the air ambulance that's landed, take it from ground level. Phenomenal attraction rate I got, because it was all distorted, back doors were open, but it was no longer a serious injury. So I could do that. It wasn't making something out of serious like that. When it goes wrong, if you like, when 2 people have complained out of 30,000, which was the reach that I found that complaint had, it's sort of, okay, is there a way we can avoid this happening in the future? And it's very much an educational thing. You can do that with the comms. My fear with some comms is that comms tend to run the force in other forces because they are the experts and they tell the chief what you really shouldn't be doing that. The chief is tied because the chief is like, do I have 5 more cops on the street, or do I have 3 more or 5 more people in comms dealing with all the comms side of things? It's a real tough question where they could be criticised and whatever. So there's that aspect as well.
What's interesting for me is, and we sort of touched on a spectrum of what's important because policing has to have a strategy around its messaging and various other stuff. But I sort of call that tentpole content. So that's the sort of repetitive content that when we go on holiday, you see on your doorstep in terms of stuff, flyers. You'll pick up flyers and advertising and various things, and you don't really engage with it, but you might pick it up and read and go from there. And the comm side of policing doesn't seem to see on the corporate side much in the way of engagement. Now, social media for me is two-way conversation. It's all about engagements. People want to engage. That's the whole reason why they're on social media. And if the conversation is top down and one directional, I think you switch off, you lose your engagement ratio. And I think that's where the accounts like Harry have an advantage when it comes to the engagement, because actually, Harry, you were always looking to engage with your followers. And I think that is often missed with the corporate accounts, and essentially they stick to that tentpole content, which is a switch off.
It's funny, you've just reflected what Kevin Campbell-Wright has just asked on the questions. He says, isn't it just about content, but about listening to the conversation? He runs a community Facebook page. And it's very much the organic conversation that goes on, which is so useful with social media and getting a real discussion. But get ready to just lob the parachute out the window and jump out when it gets a little bit silly, because sometimes silence is golden. And inevitably you get someone who comes in and says something because they don't like the police or they got arrested yesterday. And it's important not to bite with that. And it inevitably happens, unfortunately, but it's just steering your way around that, really, that is so important.
And I think with the digital world, so often there's been a traditional bureaucratic way of speaking when police officers are delivering press conferences or whatever it is, it's characterized by formal and impersonal tone. And the digital world is not about that. It's all about authenticity. It's all about the people. And we've seen Cressida doing some really good work with the Met, doing some informal style interviews. She was at Lewisham Police Station just yesterday or the day before, and it was very authentic, and you start to get a real sense of Cressida and what's behind her and her messages. And I think we need to see more of that in the digital world. And again, the personal accounts deliver that, because we get to know the face behind the name. As a society, we're really interested in other people. That's why Gogglebox does well, or Big Brother, or Love Island, whatever. It's just that insatiable appetite to really get an insight into other people. And what social media has done is we can touch and reach out and connect with our celebrities. People can talk to Nick, for example, and Nick is someone's hero, and that's special. And for a lot of people, police officers are just that, and it's a love, that's what breeds that reassurance and trust is that communication, that ability to reach out and have contact. And I think that the corporate accounts kind of eliminate that.
Yeah. And I've always said the best thing about Twitter for me is that I can have a little influence on those who have a lot of influence. So you've got the shop window where you are discussing with stuff with the public and getting involved with conversations, but the private messages, the direct messages, the rooms in the background are just bustling with people in different areas where it's really informative, get a lot of information. But also you could talk to, like you say, you can talk to people like Nick, and you can talk to politicians, and you talk to all sorts of people in their field. And I remember the policing minister, she's our Northern Ireland secretary, shadow policing minister, she phoned me up because somebody said, you need to speak to Harry about this, about the police pursuits, and why if they do drive according to their training, that's not always enough. They'll end up in court. And she didn't get that initially. 20-minute conversation in the field outside the ARV centre, and then she sends me a link to the Times interview that she did the following Monday, and it was pretty much our conversation. So I mean, that's phenomenal, isn't it? You can't get better than that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think another good point to make is it doesn't matter if you're based in Devon and Cornwall, or London, or Staffordshire, or Lincolnshire, wherever it is. If you're a roads policing officer, as you were, Harry, well, you were an armed response officer who happened to do some roads policing as well. Due to
could I just say he was Snow Commander?
Oh, Snow Commander. Can you say it in your voice again, Nick? Because yeah.
Snow Commander.
Oh, yes.
I ribbed him ever since about that.
I've secretly loved it.
Did you do any online training for that, Harry?
No, some pretty odd. No, I'll bore you with that. That's a whole comms thing on its own. That is.
Yeah, but that was interesting in itself, actually. Because when we had the snows and that all the roads in and out of Devon were pretty much locked up and people were getting stuck on the motorway. During that time, Harry's social media letting people know, look, don't get to these roads, don't try down these roads. This area of Devon's really locked up. We're dealing with that at the moment. Don't head out tonight if you think you. That's actually all really, really good stuff that people then passed around, and you were getting retweets and forwardings that coming from that account in a way that they weren't with corporate corporate accounts. And I think that's really interesting, because a personal relationship feels like you're engaging with a person you know. It's almost like a local Bobby kind of thing, rather than the corporate account, which actually just feels like it's like in military circumstances, that veterans will talk about how they hate the MOD, but they love the army.
Yes.
Unless you're in it, you don't know the difference. And actually, these personal comms have a very similar thing. The other thing I find fascinating is, you'll know this, Tom, that in Formula One, somebody who's actually been there and done it is a useful commodity, and all teams will actually have former drivers and champions and people involved. Ross Brawn, who actually was a team manager and a great engineer, has now gone on to be in command of Formula One. And like someone like Harry, who is the Ross Brawn of armed response vehicles. Although, to be honest, Ross Brawn's carrying a few pounds, and Harry's like a racing whippet. I saw him the other day. But he's actually out there and able to come in and join in and talk at this. Why isn't he being used by a comms team? He's had extensive experience on how to deal with it and what things people will respond to. But he's not being asked to come in and be part of the teams that are dealing with this. And I think that's
there is a problem as well, and I'm not saying it's my force, but some forces are where the comms team are understaffed, massively busy, and so if they can get through the day, they're happy. Yeah, the chief is saying, "Hey, can we do this? Can we do that?" And they're like, "Whoa, we can only just keep the lid on what we've got, even if it's good news or bad news. If you've got the wrong people in any line of work where they haven't got the motivation, or they just haven't got the numbers to deal with any more information, then that is a problem." And it comes back to that, I wanted to hire another 15 cops, but I can't because I'm split. Do I need more people in the comms team?
Again, I'm sorry to be talking so much, but it's just when I was in news and I was working as a news journalist in a newsroom, probably because I didn't go the normal way into news, I'd actually read the Journalist Guide to Law back to front about 30 times. So people would ask me, so we'd get an interview in, and I'd say, "We're going to run this." And news editors, "You've got to talk to the lawyers first." Well, we're perfectly fine on this. Every time I rang the lawyers, they get, "No, you can't run that." I go, "Yes, you can." "No, you can't. It's prejudicial." "No, it's not, because the case isn't active yet." Or, "That's slanderous." "No, it's not. It's a reasonably held belief by the person involved." He calls him an idiot. That's not detrimental. That's his own opinion. If he called him a thief, then you couldn't say it. So I'd have to argue with the lawyers, because their natural state of being is, "No, you can't run that," because that way they don't have any problems. They never get into difficulty. Comms teams are very similar with chief constables. Could we do this? No. Should we respond to that? No. Let's just back down and apologise. That's not the way forward.
No,
can I jump in
Sophia.
here, because I feel like we're on a platform for comms people, commsHERO, and I don't want to get us, all of us slating comms team, because we're not that bad, Harry. You know this, because I am Harry's publicist, so I am going to big him up a little bit. But we do chat and we do talk about how you say you've got the freedom now to do things, and we look for opportunities. But one big thing for me that I do not understand in the policing world is when officers retire after 30 years service and all that knowledge and experience, why are they not asked, like Nick said, to come back in, like Harry, to join the comms team? Because you've got that experience and you've done that job. You have that slant on it. So I think rather than slating the comms teams, can we add to those by bringing people like Harry and others in? That's my take on it and what I would do.
I agree. The only context I'm making these comments in the context of the fact that individual accounts in various different forces, individual accounts are being closed down and being brought in under the umbrella account because we can't trust you to do it. What I'm saying is, unless you've got the knowledge of people like Harry sitting in the room so that you can turn around and say, "Why has he said this? This looks like people are complaining about what he said. Why has he said this?" And Harry can say, "Well, because of this, this, and this." And so, "Oh, it's going to make sense."
Are they closing them?
But
are they closing them because they're not trusted?
I don't know.
I didn't realise. Right.
That's it. It stops a whole load of complaint procedures and people involved in those, because it's still, they'll say it's very quick system. Yes, but a very quick system for each complaint on social media is still quite intense. So it needs an adult to have a look at it and say, "I'm sorry, this is ridiculous." 28,000 people disagree with you. However, I think the problem, I was going to say something, but going into that side of things, they do these surveys, and there are these sort of surveys that are put on the corporate sites to say, "Can we have survey of what you actually want?" And of course, that doesn't necessarily reach Mrs. Miggins, who just loves to follow her neighbourhood beat officer, her PCSO and her dog handler, but she's not following the force account, so she doesn't know there's a survey. And so the survey comes back that everyone wants just, they don't want these people who should be doing police work and shouldn't be twittering away on their thing. How many times have I been accused of that? There was no time to do any Twitter when I was at work. The only time I did Twitter at work was when I was at a hurry up and wait situation where I could then put something out where I was stuck waiting for recovery or something like that. Otherwise, it was all done in my own time, quite frankly, because I thought that, there's that much investment in policing. But yeah, I mean, it's horses for courses, because some people are like, they want to make their money and go home because they've just had it from the media, from the public and all that at the moment.
Also, Harry, just don't listen to surveys. People always ask surveys how they should. What sort of television you want? We want more news, more documentaries. We really like quality dramas. Okay, so then you do a quality drama and 2 million people watch. You do Love Island and there's 7.5 million people watch.
It's true.
Surveys tend to be loaded, the question. So when you look at results or data can be interpreted. It's too subjective sometimes, the data. Data is not always objective. And I think that's something to be mindful of. Picking up on Sophia's point, you're absolutely right. Corporate accounts and the corporate expertise and professionals behind those accounts do a remarkable job, and it's worth just touching on that. And I know Sophia is in that strand, but I've been in and seen firsthand just how difficult it is. And we've talked predominantly about social media, which is not digital marketing or digital communications. It's just one strand of that whole umbrella. And Harry touched on everyone being stretched and being short-staffed, and the communications in those hubs or the expertise within those communications hubs are working tirelessly on the internal comms and also the external comms and all of the work that goes out around the other digital strategies, around the other pillars. And I think social media in today's day and age is so time consuming. I always say, if you're going to take social media seriously, then you're going to have to be prepared to invest a huge amount of time in social media. And I think we're just looking at Surrey Police now doing something around introducing people that are handling those accounts 24/7 now. I don't know if Harry's seen that, or Nick or Sophia, but you'll see Surrey on their Twitter. I mean, I don't have Facebook or Instagram. I'm not cool enough, but I do Twitter, and you'll see them saying, hi, it's Simon and Amber or something like that. I'll be taking you through the night. And I think that's a big step in terms of communications, because that's the first account that I've seen that is actually staffing people 24/7.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's what we need. That's what we need. We need that specifically. It's such a vast audience out there for that, and to have someone who's specifically for that. But we all know, we all stretch, and so they'll be used and they'll be given another job and whatever. It's tough times, isn't it? It's not going to be a perfect world.
But I'd like to see. Would you, Harry? I'd like to see the officers actually using those individuals. So if you're on a night shift and you're somewhere, have a way of being able to deliver information to those individuals, so that account becomes much more relevant in terms of it being live and having a heartbeat and really showcasing what the police are up to and that authenticity. I always, when I go on ride-alongs, I'm a big advocate, and I've been doing various different things with Southwest BCU in the Met, where we look at showcasing exactly what it is police officers are doing. And those accounts, I think, can be used, especially if they're being staffed now, to do much more in terms of showcasing the world of policing. Why does police interceptors do well? Why does traffic cops do well? Nick will know this. They're shown in the biggest areas for revenue streams, in terms of ad revenue streams and stuff like that. Those programs score really, really highly, and that's why they're repetitively shown at those times. And the appetite's there, and I just think we should have more. It can be as live, but just more insight and transparency. And it goes back to policing owning its own content.
Because we've got the reason that those are successful is because they're being watched by the silent majority, who are the people that come out and quietly get on with their lives and aren't on social media. They're not the people who are spending all their time on TikTok or Instagram or I mean, look, the last election is a very clear example of that. If you'd have gone by social media and what was going on, then we were looking at a very different result. Come the day, the result was nothing like anything anybody expected. Because Middle England had gone out and said, I can't do this, so I'm going to do this. That is the same. Well, that's the same with, you know, in terms of programming about policing. It's one of the difficulties that part of the reason I got active is because I was talking to police officers who were saying everybody hates the police. And that's not actually true. The trouble is that if you're in the police force, you are predominantly facing bad. You are coming face to face with all the people, all the bad side of society. And the few times you get to talk to the good side of society, it's to give them bad news. Very rarely do police officers walk down a road, knock on a door and say, I've just stopped in to tell you nothing's happened in your road this year. You know, you don't get that positive kind of thing. So there is a skewed view. And on social media, as I said, you've got a lot of angry people with axes to grind who will take the opportunity. I mean, one of the comments coming up on the side here, and they were saying, you know, people saying, oh, on our social media accounts, we got so much abuse. And very little positivity. People who actually had a positive view of it are quite happy with what's going on. They don't go online to tell you they're very happy about it. People who have an axe to grind with the police, if they find a social media account, will use that to grind their axe. This is why it's important when you actually have social media teams dealing with it, that you don't react to a response as being negative, even if it is negative, because it might be coming from a section of the community that have an axe to grind. And so, you know, I would say we come back to this point that we started out with. Trust the police, trust the officers, and as Sophie said, give them more training. Don't close them down.
No, I agree. And just touching on the chat bar, there is a Q&A bar as well, which allows us to get questions up into the screen and answered by Harry, Sophia and Nick. One of those is from Emma. It says, I'm proud to be in comms, but how do you get other officers invested in comms to get this community-led content? I find we can't get those frontline teams to give those important stories.
That rings.
I hear that over and over again, Harry, and you're going to...
Yeah, and I know why. Because what's in it for them if it goes to a corporate account? If you have a personal relationship with the person you know on the other end of the comms, so you know that Jane and Fred are doing the social media tonight, and you've got a personal relationship, and so then you're more likely to say, oh, I'm going to get some good stuff for them tonight. And this is... It's easily forgotten as well, because I've been to jobs. I thought, oh, why didn't I just get I was really lovely. That was a positive thing, and I just missed the opportunity. It is busyness. It is the fact that I say to people, if you want to get good photographs, but they've got to be in an appropriate place at an appropriate time and things. And officers are going, well, if I do that, it's not going to bring me any good. It's only going to bring me some harm. Yes, I used to email the comms about some good jobs that were going on, so they had that positive message. But I also had a statement to do and half a file that needed doing still, and before I went home. So you got to give officers the motivation to know that actually this feels good to do this, and this is positive.
And it's just another add-on to their to-do list. So we already know officers are just being asked to do more and more and more. And I've sat in briefings and listened to what it is they've got to do on top of all, and it is that challenge. I think, though, there would be an appetite for the younger audience or the younger joiners in terms of those coming in at the bottom of the organisation, because ironically, they're the ones that understand this world so well because they've been a part of it for so long. And, I said I don't do Instagram. I mean, I was the other day trying to do an Instagram story where you could put a link in or something like that. And I've just not got a clue. But, I could go to a 14, 15-year-old or now a 19, 20-year-old joining the police. They'll be like, just straight away and just roll it out. And we're talking about social media. It's transformed the digital world in the last 10 years, a bit like photography changed with the digital world. So what we were doing 10 years ago in terms of marketing and communications is now completely different today. And what we'll be doing in 10 years' time is probably completely different. And my granddad always used to say, well, ask the whiz kids. And those are the ones coming in at the bottom of the organisation that have so much knowledge and experience to share on this topic.
Sophia, do you think if you actually had someone like a Harry in every one of those comms teams, that then the people out on the ground would go, if I ping this in, like that someone like Harry's going to do something with it, rather than it being a corporate thing? Do you know what I mean?
I do think so, because I know me and Harry have talked about how the comms teams work, because you've always said corporate comms. So I do think having someone like Harry in there, you know, you're trusted to other officers. You're one of them, because I have heard about the divide between the comms teams and, to be honest, between uniformed staff and civilian staff. It's the same in every industry, really. You do get your back of house and front of house divides. But if you have someone trusted like Harry, or the other thing as well, like Tom, you were saying, the younger audience, I would say anyone who in the force really wants to do it, you know, like they might go out there and you've talked about why we should do it. It's basically, for me, the way I see it, it's sort of replacing, not that you can, the Bobby on the beat is the digital version, isn't it? Where you're giving that information. It's the person, you know, I know some officers around North Yorkshire and things like that, and you know them personally because they're authentic. They come across and chat about what they're doing and their jobs, like everybody else uses social media for their jobs, or the majority of them. So I would say having anyone that is interested in it, they're the best people to go to and say, do you want some training on this? You know, some do's and don'ts and things like that. And some of Harry's bad examples.
I've supplied them free of charge as well for people.
By the way, interestingly, Tom, somebody just said this. You know, we say that like this is Joel Sampson is saying, we say that young people know how to push the buttons. They don't necessarily know how to converse with the public. And also the way that an online specialist who's 23 converses online isn't necessarily how speaking in a way that somebody who's on social media who's 45 or, you know, living in the countryside will deal with it. So that's why I think the combination of all the ability of young people in the comms team combined with somebody who is an officer who has been there and done it is the ideal combination. And I think then that person can become the focal point. So again, I keep using you as an example, Harry, sorry about this, but just an example, if you had a Harry connected with that team, then other officers would go, I'll ping this through to Harry because I know that he'll run with it if he thinks it's worthwhile.
I can't because it's snowing and I'm doing the snow commander stuff right now. So I can't do everything, you know, Nick.
There was another question that said, were you a member of Snow Patrol? But I let that one go.
It's an interesting point you make there. And I think that it's almost like a sports team or a Formula One team. Everyone's got a different role. And I think that the communications hat, and I just alluded to it in terms of the digital world and how it's changed things, is that spectrum of deliverables has really expanded. And Sophia, maybe you can talk to us about some of the challenges that police comms or people that work in communications have faced. Because Nick, you made the point, what works for me in terms of engaging on Twitter might not work for a recruitment drive looking at 18, 19, 20-year-old officers that aren't, or potential officers that aren't on Twitter. They might be on TikTok, or, you know, I've never been on TikTok. I couldn't even tell you how to put a post on TikTok or what happens. But it's that type of we have pods of communities, and they're sort of divided through demographics and age and different things, using different platforms. And that whole spectrum is quite vast now. And I would not be comfortable trying to engage with certain audiences on certain platforms because I just don't feel that I've got the expertise.
I think there's two-way education here as well, where we're saying, you know, police officers can explain to the comms team how it works. I think it's the other way around as well, because I'm guilty of this. I would look at police Twitter accounts think, come on, why are you not replying to those? You could easily turn them around or add a bit of personality. And then when I joined West Yorkshire Police and learned about the teams, there's like, I mean, they're a force of like 10,000 staff or something like that. They've got about 3 comms people and 1 dedicated to social media. And then I realised, how can that one person 24/7 do Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the just the avalanche of comments that come in, and negative ones, like you say, Nick, the ones that really have an axe to grind, they're the ones that are shouting on there. You'd need like a dedicated team of like 10, I would say, and that's just scratching the surface. To sit there full time going through that and replying, not to all of them because some are just stupid, but replying and giving them answers and things. It's crazy.
Actually, Harry, before you answer, there's a really interesting follow-up here from Jules Loveland that says, training is so important. People need skills and confidence, but you'll never get buy-in from officers if they don't know what's in it for them. So maybe that's the starting point, the why.
Yeah, it comes down to it all the time because they're busy and they just think it's probably going into the ether. This is the problem. I think officers can help themselves as well by what I used to do. If there was an incident that went on a night shift, I would send a quick email to the comms team to say, oh, just to let you know, log a number at this. It might catch a little bit of press attention. This is what we know about it. This is what I probably wouldn't bother saying, but you probably promote this over to you. And they were forever grateful for that, because this is what uses those three people's time up, is when the press ring them and say, oh, there was a job about an escaped elephant in Paynton, what is that? And they're like, they've got egg on their face because, well, we don't know. And then they're searching and they think, they're searching under elephant, and then it was a rhino, and so no wonder they didn't find it. And so it goes on. So this was constant. So I think officers maybe a little bit more. I think what the problem is, officers are so tunnel visioned in the busyness of their day. It's the grey area is the civilian. It's not a them and us. It's they do other stuff. That's not my stuff. My stuff is here. And it's getting that sort of reputation, maybe with personalities, maybe with a little bit of, if it's a semi-corporate account, just a department, I always say stick your initials on there. So at least people know. They go, oh, LH is great. It was him again. He's out and about. It's getting that personal relationships going.
What's good practice, and Mike's talked about it now, Sophia made a good point, having several trained officers operating at the same time, the account is invaluable, is in the Met, they differentiate from that sort of brand strategy, messaging and sort of corporate importance to now having communication teams within every BCU. So if you don't know the Met makeup, they have BCUs, not boroughs, and they're the areas that London's broken up into. And those communications teams now are staffed by officers. And we were just talking to one before we came online, Bryn, who's going to be the voice of Lambeth. He's a fabulous candidate. But now I know, having been to Lewisham and having been to Southwest BCU, so Kingston, those communication teams are now staffed by officers. And I think that's really, really important and a really good step forward. And the reason I've mentioned that is because I think we talked a lot about some of the things that don't happen. I think the Met have actually done something that's good practice there and could be shared.
I think that's a good idea, as long as the officers that you're bringing are senior officers who have been there and done it and have an interest. Interestingly, bringing in junior officers who haven't necessarily spent much time on the beat, yes, and in amongst it, they might be much better with comms and tech and all that kind of thing, but they might not necessarily have the depth of experience you want. And I think this is where you miss out on the opportunity to use people who have gone into retirement or early retirement. Interesting here, Mike Panner has just said that Sophia made a great point. Having several trained officers operating off the same account is invaluable. Some police accounts have 10 people with access, all pitch in when required. That's actually a really good way forward. My worry at the moment, Sophie, and you maybe you can answer, I don't know how much you're aware of this, but there are forces that are closing down and telling their officers they can't have personal accounts, and it must all go through the comms team. Tom, you'll be aware from the Formula One, and maybe I'm a lot older than you, so I remember specifically, but Jean Todt and Ross Brawn talking about when they came into Ferrari to create the Schumacher era. They said, what was the major problem? And he said, well, But so one of the major problems was between one race where they messed it up and the next race, they spent 2 weeks talking about whose fault it was rather than fixing the problem. I get the feeling at the moment with social media, there is a sense in some forces of trying to find out whose fault it is and not letting them near it, rather than saying, how do we go about actually getting a better comms team? And where you see it happening, where you've got, like Mike mentions, 10 people on call, senior officers who know what they're talking about, who've had some media training, who can actually, under pressure, come in and start dealing with it, or that officers know they can contact, because all officers have secret little groups and WhatsApp groups and whatever. Then you actually get that, that would be a way forward, and attach that to the comms team, and you've actually got yourself, and start trusting your officers.
And also, though, it's not if something goes wrong, it's when it goes wrong. Because I said to mine, as I say, I can't praise my guys enough, but they went through a lot to keep me up there. But I said to them, it's like, if you've got more than 4,000 followers, then bin it, because you'll get much more complaints after that, just because of the volume of people that are going to see it and the way it spirals out. And so if you haven't got many followers, if you're an officer, that's fine. And I'm being tongue-in-cheek there, of course I am. I'm being a bit sarcastic on that, but it's absolutely true. Your complaints start spiraling, and it's not necessary. Okay, you can look at it out of context. You go, oh God, yeah, I was tired. Yeah, it sounds a bit bad. And that's how you go back to the comms. Yeah, got that one wrong. Oops, sort of thing. And it's not, as long as it's not malicious, it's negligent, it's dishonest or something like that, then they should really be, okay, let's give this another go.
And there's a push also to actually keep accounts local. So that having 4,000 followers is dreamy. That some of the accounts now, they just want, 20 people living in 3 roads of the local area. I don't see the point in that. I learned a huge amount from Harry, and there's an officer, I think it's Cheshire, Sergeant TCS, who does the Project Edward stuff around road safety. Then there's Andy Cox at Lincolnshire, who's nationally leading for road safety. More people are killed and seriously injured on the roads than any other, anything that might happen to you. So, and that's so important. I mean, imagine if you were just so narrow-minded that Andy Cox or whoever it was in Cheshire could only talk to sort of the 100 people that were in that neighbourhood that they happen to be.
Let me just get in, because this is so important. I don't care what all the statisticians say, and I don't dislike them as much as it may come across, because I'm usually arguing with them. But it's so difficult to measure positive stuff. You don't know how many people have followed Twitter and followed officers' stuff and gone, do you know what? I was going to join the fire service, but I'm going to join the police. Do you know what? I think it's fine. Yeah, you have some hard times, but actually they're, blah, blah, blah. You can't measure that. You can't measure the positivity. They'll say, oh, yes, you can if you do. No, rubbish, you can't. You can measure negative stuff because it's all complaints. No, we've had so many complaints. We had, like Nick said, they don't ring up and say, oh, just to let you know, I think you're brilliant.
This is my favourite thing when I'm actually talking to people in the court about the courts and about the weak sentencing of people who attack police officers or whatever. And they always come back with, well, incarceration. We know that incarceration doesn't work because the figures show at the reoffending level. I go, okay, where's the figures for the number of crimes that were committed whilst they were locked up?
Yes, exactly. It gives us all a break.
There's your positive. Figures. There are you can't measure the number of crimes that weren't committed whilst they were locked up.
No, well, we know, and we knew every briefing. I won't go on to a spiral here, but every briefing we'd be at our Jim Jones is released on Monday. Okay, well, we knew to go into the residential areas because he'd be burglaring, and you'd be sat on some blubbing old lady's.
Harry's off on one.
I am. It is. I'll bring it back.
We're running out of time.
Nobody cares.
We're running out of time, Harry. I'm taking it back. No. I've kept it to the end because it is a bit of a contentious subject. And we've seen as there's been that power grab to bring accounts in-house, a real rise in the number of Anon accounts. And there's some Anon accounts that are absolutely fabulous. And there's UK Cop Humour who permanently keep me amused. And there's some Tree Cop, for example, in terms of their focus on well-being, and some of the other accounts, their insight is just second to none. But there is just on the other side 1 or 2 accounts that could be challenging too much or being a little bit too divisive. And I think that's quite an interesting area to talk about. And I'll open that up to Harry. What are your thoughts on that landscape?
I don't know.
Or
I'm going to take it over to Nick, and then I'll come back to me.
All right, I'll tell you what, I'll go first because this is a really challenging area, especially for anyone who's actually in the police. You're absolutely right. Some of them are absolutely fantastic. Some of them drift far too far, and you can tell in some of the accounts where police who have had tough careers are, now that they're out of the force, are working through some of the anger they have over opinions that they held over a period of time. When you're out of the police, you're able to say vocally, you're able to say more about what you felt than you were when you were in the police. And sometimes that shows up some pretty old-fashioned ideas that I'm not very comfortable with as well. And, you know, I've had these discussions with Harry where I've said, have you seen this account? That's really not appropriate. And I have to look at the account and all the things that are being said on things that I've taken interest or even am following on social media. Because the moment somebody says something that's inappropriate on there, I've got to be out of there, and because otherwise I'm associated by just simply following. And so it's quite difficult to keep attached to things because you have got to watch out. The moment somebody says something inappropriate, you've got to go, sorry, that's not a group I can be involved with anymore. You're holding bad views. So you have to pick and choose on those. Undoubtedly, there are accounts in there that are very good and actually speak to, and when you've got the national media having a go at you, when you've got government having a go at you, when your own chief constable doesn't appear to be supporting you, it can feel like a pretty lonely place. And some of these accounts give some of those police some sense of home. But some of them are pretty edgy, and some of them step way over the line, and I don't think are appropriate for serving officers to follow. So you've got to pick and choose.
Yeah, go for it, Harry.
I will confess that I can't do two things at once. I was reading the question on the right-hand side, and that's why I skirted it across the neck.
I knew it.
I will say, and I've had this conversation with all three of you, and the fact that when I left the police, I found very little difference. I thought it would be like, yeah, freedom, freedom. Nobody likes a ranter. They just rant off on something. It's boring, it's extreme. It's like nobody likes that. They still like quite a balanced response, but an honest response. Nick, working for the BBC, he's got to behave in a certain way. He's civilian. Tom, yourself as, BT Sports presenter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't be saying these off the thing. And to be honest, so I think you've still got, and I think it's a healthy level of, and I certainly know I've been speaking to you, Sophia, on that subject. It's that healthy level of just bring it down so you don't get your emotions into it too much, that you do have balance, but you are honest with it as well, that it's not just a bland corporate response you're going to give as well. And those people who do just rant off, they lose their audience, and they'll just keep a very intense sort of attention from a small part of that audience, I think.
But there are a select few that do have tens of thousands of followers, and the media do follow them. And we've talked about policing. It's a bit like being a goalkeeper. No one talks about saves you make, but as soon as you let one through your legs, everyone wants to know about it. And even, these police officers, they can do extreme damage, and the media, there are people there waiting for these accounts to make mistakes and say the things that they say. Sophia, if you're in policing, how do you address this situation? That's a challenge.
Ooh.
I'll put you on the spot.
Never lost for words. Yeah. I was actually thinking of good and bad police accounts and what I'd use as an example. So at the moment, if serving or retired officers come to me and say, how should I do my social media? That's some of the questions I get. I do give them example accounts. I won't give the bad ones, but I will say one, it's not even just a pet hate. It's just horrible to see. I've noticed a lot of retired officers have a go at current serving police and forces, and I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, agree.
What are you doing?
As a police supporter on the outside, it's so hard to sometimes battle the tide, and then you've got police officers turning up.
Police officers. You think, what are you doing? And why did you do it for 30 years if you hate it that much? Is the question
that's
I
one
was
rule.
asked.
See,
But, go on, sorry.
See, I think that the more this gets regulated and the more controlled and the wider the power grab in terms of a social media footprint, I think we're going to see more accounts. And I think this is a problem that policing didn't see coming, and I think is actually going to grow in terms of actually get better.
I agree. In actual fact, and again, Mike Pannett's making the point that, half the police force is embracing the 21st century and half are going back to the Stone Age, with the result that people who would have been had their face on it are starting anon accounts. Yes. Well, they're a lot harder to deal with if you've got an anon account than you actually if you are embracing your officers and encourage them in the right direction, where they are controllable. That's it's a double-edged sword, and it's a bad game.
Although you got the Met skipper, who I know very well, so he's a positive anonymous account, and that's even better in a cheeky way, because they're sort of distanced away from the police force. But as long as they're positive, they can stretch the line a little bit. They can answer in a way they probably wouldn't have if they were a named officer. So you do have those. They're very few, and you've got to be very skilled to do that.
Yeah.
Is it a bit like Banksy of the police world?
Yeah, it is, isn't it, really? It is. It is. Yeah.
Right. I'm aware that we're coming up to 3:15. There's been loads of wonderful comments. Nafis has just said so much of what's being discussed here can be applied to other sectors. A great session. Thank you. If anybody has any quick comments or any quick questions, please do tap away in the chat bar, or forever hold your peace. But from my perspective, I think today's conversation has gone incredibly quickly, and we've covered what is a really broad spectrum in terms of communication. We talked a lot about social media. I really do think social media underpins the digital world in terms of communications, but there are other forms of communications, email and various other things. But is there anything else that you'd like to add, Nick, in terms of our conversation today? Just interesting that somebody, Brynner's actually asked, can we hear more about the escaped rhino, which I think goes back to Harry's story.
Yeah,
Harry
turned out to be a small kitten.
Yeah, Harry is in fact in retirement. The rhino. He's thick-skinned, horny, and can charge anything he likes. And you've got an evening coming up, haven't you, Harry? You've got various evenings coming up where you can listen to Harry talk about all his stories. And that, from my perspective, going out with policing, the stories that I've picked up, and I only, I go out once in a blue moon. Police officers are out there 24/7, 365 days a year. And the things that you see and do and the stories that you have are just, people just can't believe it.
Yeah, and I will unashamedly thank you for that. We've got YouTube chat with Dave Wardell at 4:00 on a Saturday on YouTube and Twitter, Facebook, and that is really good. We've got Superintendent Angela Quinton, people like that who are in really good places, positive people from various, and we have them on for an hour, and so it'd be lovely to see other people there. Thank you for that.
Harry, I've just put the web link in there, so if anyone wants to see where Harry's touring and his frontline chat links, they're in there.
You should work in
and everything else.
You should work in PR and communications, Sophia.
Yeah, she'd be good, wouldn't she?
One of the last things I'd say in terms of communications, it is very difficult for the police at the moment, and they do feel under. I know that police officers feel really under attack from many different areas, and it's a tough job to do at the best of times anyway. But I'd go back to that thing where it's very easy to believe that everybody's set against you. In actual fact, the quiet majority are very much on your side. It's just that they're not very vocal about it, and a lot more people understand and value what you do than so I'm trying at the moment. I've been trying to get the police bravery awards on television, because I think if people saw those awards and the stories that go with them, I think it would be I think that would engage the public even more, and all of that social engagement, whether it be through television, telling those stories, gives the general public a much better idea of what officers do on a day-to-day basis. I've said it a few times that an officer will kiss their kids good night tonight and then go out on patrol and be walking through doorways into God knows what and breaking up fights and all the different things that they do and risking their lives on a daily basis for all of us. And it's people just simply don't know. There's much more support than you believe, and much more appreciation for what you do, which is why I stay involved for the moment. And although I tend not to get invited to the Police Bravery Awards anymore because I think I've upset a couple of chief constables over the time.
Did they not used to screen that on telly? Because unless I dreamt it, I thought when I was younger I used to watch something to do with police bravery, or was that just generally brave people?
And various different things. I'm going this year, so if you are there, Nick, it'd be a pleasure to catch up. But
Yeah, we'll have an orange juice together.
Yeah, I echo your thoughts. I mean, my journey into policing started 8 years ago. I didn't know anything about policing bar the odd traffic stop and what you saw on TV and read in the newspaper. I was just amazed to see what went on. And actually, I came away compelled to tell the policing story. And that's what was the catalyst to what is where I'm at today, because what you see and what you think you know is just not what is actually out there on the front line. And I've met so many wonderful men and women who I'm proud enough to call friends now, who go out and do an incredible job. And I use my social media channels, if you follow me, when I do go out on ride-alongs, to actually tell the story. What are the challenges? What are the tensions? What are the officers facing? How did they feel in terms of what it was they were going to deal with? And especially in parts of London where I've been, it's been unimaginably challenging. So I think and that's why we're here. We're passionate about social media and communications, but we're passionate about policing. We're passionate about getting the truth out there. And I think we can do so much good work in the media and communications arena to be able to really showcase policing in a much better light.
Can I just say, Tom, you are one of the good examples that I use to follow on Twitter and how to do police social media really well. You and John Sutherland.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, I thought I'd share that. And thank you for hosting this. You did a great job. Thanks to everyone else. And I just wanted to say sorry on behalf of Nick Adderley, who struggles with his connection. I think it might have been a firewall with the police. So that was a shame, but we are looking at doing something similar to do with police comms and generally different police topics. So I hope you guys would be involved. I know Tom and Harry have been chatting about it, so we will get those details out soon.
It's been an enjoyable chat, everybody, and I'm just pleased that we're going to finish on such an upbeat way with Harry's song. So take it away, Harry, when you're ready.
No, I haven't got time because I was just going to say how amazing it is. Sophia's managed to do this as well and land aircraft the whole time as an air traffic controller. So thank you very much.
Cheers. Multitasking.
Yeah. Well, listen, just to wrap that up, thanks, Nick. Thanks, Sophia. Thanks, Harry. But mainly thanks to everyone who's tuned in for all your questions and for whatever it is you're doing today and the talks that you're tuning into. Thanks again for the positive comments. And I hope you continue to enjoy your journey into commsHERO.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Are you going to be shooting off, or because we do have a social lounge where you can jump on the tables if anyone's got any questions that we haven't managed to answer? It's fine if you need to go. Harry, you're tired now.
Huh?
You could probably stay back and chat to everyone. So yeah. Harry will definitely be there. Nick and Tom, if you have got time, because I know you're really busy, please
I can hang around.
Table. That'd be brilliant. Thank you.
I have to go because I have to go and get my ears waxed.
What are you doing before and after?
It's a glamour of TV. No, it's one of the things about wearing earpieces in your ear all the time.
I have the same thing, Nick. And if you go swimming, it's even worse because then you get water in your ear.
Guys, I've just done it. I've got something off eBay. It's completely safe and it cleared me completely. It's amazing.
Yeah,
that was for free, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was that thing you've bought is for use at the other end, Harry.
It's completely versatile.
We need to end this session, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll head to the social lounge if everyone wants to see us there.
See you, Sophie.
Thanks.
See you, Sophie.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.